Welcome to Fully Engaged with Jennifer N. Sutherland, where we explore thoughtful conversations about navigating the intricate world of leadership, learning, and organizational development.
Laurie, I'm so excited you're here. So let me do a quick intro to you so our audience knows how amazing you are. So as a former HR leader turned influential author and speaker, Laurie has revolutionized workplace dynamics through her bold storytelling, innovative solutions, and fierce dedication to creating better employment experiences. Her remarkable journey from corporate HR leadership to becoming a recognized career advisor and author of a bestseller called Betting on You. Laurie, welcome to Fully Engaged.
Well, thank you so much. It's nice to hear people say kind things about me. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And they're all true. And we're going to talk about why you earn every one of those accolades we just talked about. So you're on a podcast called Fully Engaged. So the first thing I want to ask you is, what does that mean to you? What does fully engaged mean to you?
Well, I think the standard definition of fully engaged means that you show up just eyes wide open, heart full for everything you do. Um, I don't know. I don't necessarily feel that for me. I think I'm fully engaged when I'm rested, when I'm relaxed, and when I have maybe a modicum of cynicism, and I don't think that the thing I'm about to do is going to be the next great thing in this world. Like I'm fully engaged when I'm like along for the ride and curious about where it's going to go. Kind of like this podcast. I'm locked in. I'm just chill.
I love it. Seeing what's next, what's going on. I'm in. I'm going to try it. Let's see what happens. And
It
we
might
learn from it one
suck.
way or the other.
Yeah, it might be terrible, but it might be great. Let's figure it out together. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then you adjust. You learn from that. I love it. Um, how would you describe workplace culture? And in your opinion, what has been sort of the best example of that you've seen in your
Mm.
history?
Well, thank you for asking such a complicated and depressing question because I purposely opted out of the world of work like almost 20 years ago to do my own thing as an entrepreneur because even at the best in class companies with the leading brands, I found there's really no such thing as a company culture. There are microcultures and there's also what the CEO wants. And so it varies, right? From space to space, from person to person. And I found work to be a little Lord of the Flies, especially the further up I went on the career ladder. And so I've opted out now for almost 20 years and consulted, and I'm a writer and I think about these things. And I don't care anymore about workplace culture. I care about individual accountability. It does not matter to me what the CEO wants. It does not matter to me how people who are around you are behaving. What matters is how you show up. And if it's terrible, remove yourself from that situation or find other ways to bring enrichment to your life. So, like, workplace culture is over. Like, I'm over it. I'm all about individual accountability.
I love that. So when companies talk about their workplace values and how that applies to their culture, are you like, yeah, that looks good on paper? Or do you think, no, that can be descriptive to how they interact with each other, how they work with each other? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, all of the above. Such a great question because I think it's okay to aspire to be something greater. It's okay to really want to create a space that's inclusive and welcoming and really cultivates innovation. Very difficult to do, but the journey, the effort is absolutely worth trying and I admire organizations and leaders who feel like they can get there. I just think like capitalism has a pretty solid history these days of showing us that companies can be profitable. They absolutely can be profitable when they treat people poorly. And we used to say this thing like a decade ago before COVID. Oh, if you put your people first, the profits will follow. That's not necessarily true. In fact, the inverse has been true more than likely, right? If you put people first, you often go bankrupt. So I just think we have to deal with the realities in a very mature way of capitalism while still trying to do good and be good in this world.
So based on that, I feel like you've already given us an inclination to that answer, but you transitioned from being corporate HR, being in leadership. But what drove you to sort of take that next step to entrepreneurship, but also driving actual change in how workplaces work? Was there a driving force? Was there one instant? Was it just a combination of things and you're like, okay, I'm ready to do this. I'm just going to do what I can do to impact it.
Well, I don't usually do anything without a plan. I mean, I'm one of those people, right? When I first started out in the workforce, I really was an optimistic, sweet little young woman. I mean, I was punk rock and I'd take out my piercings and cover my tattoos, but I really thought, okay, I can do some good in this world, especially in human resources. I could be there for people at the best times of their life when we're giving them an offer letter or at the worst times. I could influence culture. I could drive strategy. I could drive change. I can help people learn and grow. And I really worked very, very hard to do that. And the harder I worked, the more responsibility was given to me, not only with managing people, but just doing more complex work. And it was always amazing to me how companies had money for themselves. They always had money for reorganizations, to bring in McKinsey, to bring in BCG, to take executives out to dinner, all sorts of perks people would find unimaginable. There was always money for that. But when it came to like really rewarding and recognizing the workforce, that was in short supply. And it was getting to me. It was wearing on my soul. And one day I was traveling for work and I was stuck in an airport somewhere. I don't know, Kansas City, who knows where I was. I was in the middle of America and I sneezed and threw out my back at the age of 29. Like, what the hell? I'm 29 years old. I've got back pain from traveling, from working, from not
Stress a bit.
putting myself first, right? And that moment, along with a few others that I actually write about in Betting on You, became the genesis of me thinking about how do I exit out of corporate America without going bankrupt? But it just took like this one moment of me sneezing and throwing out my back. And then I stumbled on stories about people taking better care of themselves. And I'm like, why not me? If companies always have money to put themselves first, why can't I do it?
I love that. I love that. And so many people like to the thought of it, but are risk averse or
Right.
nervous about the outcomes. But sometimes
Yeah.
you just have to take that first step. And like you said, you had a plan.
Yeah, I had a plan, but at first I didn't have a plan. I was just like, "What does a consultant do? Let me learn about that." How do I start a business? Where are the resources to teach me how to read a P&L a little bit better? Things like that. And 20 years into the journey, I've got tax account. You're a CEO and an entrepreneur when you pay other people, and so like that's all I do is write checks. But in outsourcing my business and really running an efficient business model, it allows me to do what I love, which is to reach people, tell stories, listen and facilitate other people's stories. And in the workforce, even in the darkest places, people are still doing good work. They're still changing lives. And we still need people to be driven by purpose and by passion. We just need them to also have hobbies and believe that their skills are good enough that they can actually take a day off and it's not going to break the bank or piss off their boss, right? So that is my purpose in life. But again, it started with doing the research and understanding what it was like to do all of this before actually jumping ship.
Yeah, I love that because to me, it is about what are you bringing to the table? We all have things outside of whatever our work is.
Yeah.
And, there's been this concept of bringing your full self to work. Eh, yes, maybe, no, I don't know. There's some things to that. But, it's okay for me to show a tattoo, right? To be able to say, I remember I had an interview with a potential company once years ago, and we had phone interviews, and
Mhm.
then the first time I came on camera, I had turquoise hair. It was just full on turquoise, and the look on the interviewer's face was like, like you just
Mhm.
saw like
I
the
know. So
the
stupid.
transition, right? And I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
"It didn't change how you thought of me, and so you saw my hair, but all of my my characteristics, my
Yeah.
my experience, everything I brought to the table is the same. I just happen to
Yeah.
have blue hair right now. That's it."
I think there's so much complication in the world of work, right? We bring our own biases, we bring cultural biases, we bring generational trauma in the way we interact with people, right? From our family of origin, we
Yep.
don't even know how it shows up, and suddenly we're like giving somebody a cranky face because they remind us of our moms, or that's maybe just might be me. But I I really feel like when people over-index on work as the thing that they identify with, number 1, it makes them weird, but it's also unhealthy for the job itself. So when you show up as a hiring manager and you interview someone and you judge them right on the spot, you're not just judging them critically, you're judging them with all of the stuff you bring to the table, the good and the bad. And if you really see yourself as so important and critical to the hiring process that you're going to judge someone with blue or turquoise hair, something's really wrong. And your decisions then can influence others on the interview team. I mean, it's just such a twisted, weird system that we have. And so when I coach executives who are burnt out, and when I really work with people who are like, oh, work is broken and I want to leave, I mean, we approach things with wonder and joy. Like, approach it as if it's your first day. Approach it as if you don't know shit. You don't know anything. So when you meet someone for the first time, just let it go where it goes. You don't have to own the conversation. And I wish somebody would have maybe told that to the person who interviewed you, because blue hair or not, Jennifer, you're amazing. You're like an asset. Any company would be lucky
Right.
to have you. Did they hire you?
They did. They did.
Did you kick butt?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And my hair still sometimes, like, I have that fairy hair in my hair right now.
Oh,
It's not
cute.
blue, but I've got little tinsel in my hair. And
There you go.
but
There
yeah,
you go.
absolutely.
You
It
can
did
do
not.
your job no matter
Yes,
what.
it did not affect my work for sure. And I love that you talked about being that sort of innocent, positive young worker, because I was definitely that idealistic person when I first started in the workforce. And to me, when I think about employee engagement, it is something that I know that I've had an impact on for other people, and it's something I've been proud of in my career, whether it's my direct reports or just because my roles in companies, being able to help people feel engaged, but in like a real way, not just like having a pizza party concept, not just, here, let's give you this quick pat on the back, but more making it real, making it relevant. So, what do you think are some misconceptions that maybe leaders have about employee engagement and related to work and workplace sort of culture and how we interact with each other?
Well, we know leadership engagement is at an all-time low. So I have no idea how you fix work for other people unless you fix it for yourself first. In fact, when I talk to disengaged leaders who are like, "Oh, I'm trying to motivate my team and it's difficult," or whatever, we're trying to accomplish a goal and I just had budget cuts. It's like, what can you do for you? Because if you fix work for yourself, or you at least address one or two issues that are, impacting your motivation, your passion, it'll have a positive downstream effect on your team and your entire organization. So I think change begins with ourselves, but oftentimes the misconception is, as a leader, it's my job to motivate other people. And the most motivating thing for an individual contributor is to see a boss who's happy, a boss who's healthy, a boss who goes home on time, a boss who isn't like bringing the weight of the world to the job. A boss with work-life balance is one of the most motivating supervisors you can ever have. And so stop trying to be performative. Stop trying to be Tony Robbins for your team, or Mel Robbins, or anybody. Be yourself. Just be a better, happier version of you. You mentioned earlier about bringing your best self to work, or your, most authentic self to work.
Yeah.
I just think, come to work and be constantly in a conversation and working on yourself. Like, what can you do to be incrementally more pleased with your work outcome? What can you do to be happier with your family? The times when I've been the most engaged in my life is when everything is on the right track. My health is good. I'm
Yes.
getting rest. Work isn't too complicated, but it's interesting. My husband and I are getting along. My extended family's not arguing about politics, right? That's the most engaged I am in this world. And I want more of that. I'm not going to get more of that by doubling down on one thing. I'm going to get more of engagement by spreading the wealth and by being a wholly differentiated human being. And that's really the core of like everything I teach. Can't be one thing. If you're one thing, you're weird.
Right. I love that.
Don't be that fully engaged leader or manager. You don't try too hard. It's just strange. You give off an ick factor.
For sure, and I love that because it is so true for myself as well. I think of my life as like a pie, a pie chart, and if anything is super disconnected with the rest, it does impact you and you kind of stress out. And so when people talk about work-life balance, I think we all know that doesn't exist. But when I think about balance, I think about that pie and making sure that those things are equitable and nothing is truly just taking way too much attention out of all of those things in your life.
Yeah,
Family, stress about finances, all of
right.
that kind of stuff. So I love that idea of thinking about how you're engaged is when those things are all working really well together. And there's no reason we can't do that in a work environment as well.
Wait, I don't understand something. Work-life balance is not a myth. If you're lucky enough to work for a corporation and to get paid every 2 weeks or on the 1st or the 15th, and you've got health insurance and a 401k, you can have work-life balance. You do not need to work 60 hours. In fact, you could work 32 hours, just do the best you can, and that's enough. Like, everybody thinks they have to give 110%, but 110% sucks. It's diluted, it's diminished. Like, give me your best 72% and then go fart around the rest of the day. I don't care because guess what? Anybody who thinks they're giving 110% anyway is lying to themselves. Those are usually the people who end up seeing me, paying me a lot of money to then try to figure out work-life balance. I'm like, I got the answer for you. Slack off a little bit. If you're a great worker, nobody's going to know. And in
Yep.
fact, they may like you more. You may be less weird. You may be less aggressive. You may be more open to listening. You may be a better conversationalist because you're not caught up in the story in your head. So, uh, it's like the less is more theory of just
Yeah.
about everything, but do less to accomplish more is like the thing executives know, leaders know it, but for some reason, individual contributors, managers, directors, they all struggle with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting because 'cause I'm always been one of those leaders that I take every single minute of my available PTO. If there's a bank of it, if there's that, or however it's gonna work at the company, but I take my time off.
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
love travel, I take the time off, and so
Right.
I encourage my employees to do that, and they have always said, "We appreciate seeing you take that time off
Mhm.
because then we know you're gonna be okay with us taking
It's
that
true.
time off." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Absolutely.
Yeah.
You've earned it, you need to refresh, whether you're going to, eat unique foods or you're just enjoying time at your own house or whatever the case is, everybody needs that in order to be happy at work, to like not do nonstop all day, every day. Like you said, trying to give 110%. You just can't.
Right, and if you're a W-2 employee, you may say, "Oh, I don't have the freedom. We're being asked to do more with less," or, "My boss is so demanding." I mean, nobody ever believes me at first when we talk about this, but those are the stories you're telling yourself, and even if those
Yep.
stories are true, and they very well might be true, you could still do less. Like,
Yep.
you're a corporate employee. The illusion is that, oh, if I just went out on my own, then I would have more work-life balance. I'd be my own boss. And I learned very early on that opening a business is a full-time job. And then doing the work of doing the business is another full-time job on top of that. So you have less freedom, less control, less autonomy, at least in the early years when you become an entrepreneur or a consultant. So these individuals who are out there working, especially working in HR departments, they dream of being HR consultants. And I'm like, are you nuts? You hate marketing. You hate talking about yourself. You're always, focused on the mission of an organization. When you become a solopreneur or an entrepreneur, you have to market yourself. And that's a dicey dance. So for anybody out there who's like, this is too much for me. I'm thinking about leaving my corporate job. Just dare them to fire you. Like, be so good, dare them to fire you. They won't. You're not gonna get fired. Do you know how hard it is to get fired? Like, it is so hard to get fired. Take more time off, do less work, do it
Right.
better, you'll be fine.
And I find a lot of people along those same lines are the ones that self-impose certain things like deadlines and expectations. It's not coming from their boss. It's not coming from the organization. They're like, "Oh, I can get that to you by next Friday." And the person's like, "Well, okay, then I'll expect it next Friday." But
Mhm.
then next Thursday comes around and somebody's already asked for something else, and you're like, "Oh," and the stress of, "Can I do it? I don't know." And then you have to tell somebody, and then you feel like you failed, and the person's like, "That's fine. The week after's fine too." Like,
I know.
we put so much on ourselves.
I'm just laughing because this is an evergreen conversation that
Yeah.
every generation has had. Boomers had it, Gen Xers like me have had it, and then, millennials and Gen Z and Gen Alphas are all starting to have this conversation like everything's too much and I'm so stressed and I have anxiety. Well, how about you just do less? Like, what what's going on here? I mean, this is my Gen X sentimentality speaking, but, like,
I
nobody
love
is
it.
asking you to light the world on fire, and in fact, you're not lighting the world on fire. I light the world on fire when I pick specific things to do, and I do them, and I also take time to pursue other interests. Like, I don't know about you, Jennifer, but one of the most important things I've discovered in my life at this age is that I feel so good when I volunteer. Not in a narcissistic way, mostly just because I'm not thinking about myself for like an hour or two during the week. And it's like glorious. It's not work, it's not like
Yep.
leisure time, but I'm doing something productive and I can be in flow and it has nothing to do with me and I'm doing some good in the world. So when people come to see me for coaching, we get a volunteer plan going right away because the way to break this closed loop cycle of the story you tell yourself is to look externally and focus on another issue or another person. And there's plenty of stuff you can do in this world without formally joining a non for profit. You can go clean up a trail. You don't need to ask for permission for that. You can babysit for a neighbor who's stressed, right? You can do a lot. You can walk a dog if your neighbors are incredibly busy, right? There are ways that you can contribute in this world. And in doing that, boy, everything gets a little bit more interesting and you get, I think, a greater sense of perspective on what good looks like.
So, talking about that and volunteering, you mentioned sometimes focusing the attention on somebody else, like another
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
That definitely leads to mentoring. And sometimes I've been in very formal mentoring programs and very informal programs, sort of just, hey, I just had somebody recently, I think it was right before the holidays, reached out and was like, hey, I think you would be a good person for me to talk to you about my career. And I was like, okay, let's talk about this. And somebody I'd volunteered with at a different organization, like a professional association. And it was like, okay, great, let's talk about that. I've also been a part of really formal programs, and you are so right. There's a student that I mentored, I wanna say like 6, 7 years ago in high school, who has now graduated early from college and is using some of her scholarship funds to go to South Africa to study abroad for 6 months. And she's been sending me videos, and we've been talking, and I've helped donate, and I've asked other people if they'd be willing to donate, but, like, that official relationship ended 5 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
But every time I hear from her, I just think, "Oh my gosh," like, I get so excited thinking about the world and the future generations and the things that make her excited, and it changes your perspective, and I think that kinda goes along with what you're saying when it comes to volunteering, it changes your perspective, like, every incident and that's one of the reasons I love travel too. So, every time I travel, I go somewhere new, I just think, "Ah, broadens my horizons." I learn something new, find a new culture, new language, new food, new craft beer because that's my thing or something like that. So I think that that is a great example and something everybody listening to this podcast can do easily.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that story. I love a good mentor story. I also like it when people just mentor by observing and stalking. I tell this story all the time that I admired a journalist by the name of Susie Welsh. She was married to Jack Welch, the old
Okay.
CEO of General Electric, but she was
Yep.
esteemed and is esteemed in her own right. Teaches at NYU Stern, was on CNBC, was the editor of the Harvard Business Review for many years. And I just watched her moves in the marketplace. And she always had like smart things to say about the world of work. And so I wanted in my book to write about mentorship, and one of the ways you can do that is just by stalking someone you admire and copying their moves. There's no new art in this world.
Right.
You can observe and you can mimic, and you're going to put your own little spin on that. So I thought, I'm going to reach out to her and tell her I'm telling this story. And so I'm like, Dear Susie, like a dork on LinkedIn, you don't know me, but I know you, and you're amazing. And she wrote back right away and said, not only am I honored about the story, I want to blurb your book.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, "Thank you so much." It was so meaningful to me. So you
Yeah.
never know where you can get inspiration from in the marketplace, but I now recommend that if you've been watching someone and copying their moves, send them a thank you note. It
Yeah.
always
Tell them.
makes a
Let them
difference.
know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Who wouldn't be flattered by that and knowing that they've made some contribution to somebody else's life? I know with the start of this podcast, I was like, okay, who maybe do I want to talk to? Who would be some of the key people? I came up with a list really quick of about 90 people that I either knew, that I'd worked with, that I have, interact with in some way. In fact, you were moderated a panel that I was on at a conference that we were at
So great.
5, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was such a like wonderful conversation. We did a quick meet and greet beforehand, and then we did the panel. And I was like, oh, I'm putting Laurie on this list. Like, I would love to have Laurie come in here. And because I remember learning from you, and that panel was well moderated, which is very difficult to do. It looks easy if you do it well, and you can tell when people don't do it well, but you did it so well. It was very fluid. The
Oh.
conversation was super
Yeah.
conversational, truly. Um,
Yeah, I
so
enjoyed
I
it,
love
and
that.
your insights were so great. And I think one of the cool things is that live events are starting to come back, and so there's more and more opportunity for people to go out into the marketplace and network in a way that's, like, lower stress than going on, like, these Zooms where you're just staring at yourself for 30 minutes,
Right.
you know? You can go back and be with people in community, and you don't have to drink, you don't have to have a glass of warm Chardonnay. You can have a sip of water, you can mix and mingle, and you can leave on your own terms. But I think conferences are such a cool way to just hear big ideas that you would never hear and like take from that pieces that apply to you in your life and your workplace and leave the rest behind. So yeah, it was wonderful seeing you in Indianapolis and I'm glad to be back on here.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. So, my career has been mostly learning and development. I was in sales for about 10 years, mostly learning and development. Now I kind of like branched into HR business partners, HR operations. But what is your sort of approach to professional development and how has that changed? Like, what are, besides conference where maybe you're meeting with people and you're just kind of getting little bites of things,
Right.
what is your idea about learning opportunities?
Well, I really believe that when you're learning, you're growing, and when you're growing, you're thriving, and that's the point of life. Like, what are we doing here if we're not learning and growing and thriving? So, I take that perspective and infuse it with a little bit of self-leadership because whether or not your company has a formal L&D program for you, you still have a responsibility to learn and grow as an adult. That's how we make contributions to our families and to the world. So a lot of times people give up on learning and development or they're like, "Oh, my company is so compliance driven," or, we learn older things that I already know." But even if you've been through a particular course before, you can always learn something new. Learning is on you. But over the past couple of years, I've done something cool, which is to become a LinkedIn learning instructor.
Oh,
And I
how
have
cool.
one of the top leadership courses on the platform with about 2 million views. It's called Be the Manager People Won't Leave. A little codependent, but I'm basically teaching you how to be a decent human being. And I didn't quite realize the power of micro learning and video learning, probably because I'm 50. Like, what do I know, you know? But people being able to engage with learning content in just these really important, meaningful, short ways is such a game changer. And again, your company doesn't need to have a subscription to LinkedIn Learning. If you have a library card, you can get on there for free. There's also University of YouTube. There's Libby, right? If you like audiobooks, there are different ways to do things where you can always be learning. And I think that for me has been a game changer in my adulthood. So I've stopped asking for HR departments to step up their learning game. I mean, they should. They absolutely should. Your CEO and your CHRO are also your chief learning officers. This is really important. But in the absence of that, you are your own chief learning officer, and there's no shortage of ways to do it and to do it cheap.
When I think about that, it hits me and that passion of it is so strong for me because of my role in L&D,
Yeah.
and I tell people to do things like that. I love the LinkedIn Learning, I love the micro learning. I also tell people there are an unlimited amount of webinars out there that you can sign up for. Even if you can't attend it and you look at it and go, "I'm never gonna be able to make that," or "My schedule won't work," sign up. You'll get a recording, you'll get a PDF of the deck, and then go back to it. I have like a library of basically resources now that I've saved. I have a file called professional development resources, and then I have categories, and I just keep it on my calendar or my computer. And if I'm like, oh, I want to put together a training for performance reviews or this other topic, I can just go and say, what else have I seen? What else has been out there? Um, and it's basically unlimited knowledge. And LinkedIn Learning is a fantastic resource and tool for that.
Yeah, I really appreciate your comment about webinars because I think that's such a good, astute point. A lot of people don't like to be sold to. And unfortunately, webinars are lead generation for a lot of these organizations, especially software companies. Doesn't mean it's not good. And it doesn't
Right.
mean that the people who are on there don't know their stuff because you can be influenced and you can be sold to in a way that feels disingenuous, or you can be influenced and sold to in a positive way, in an additive way. And really good sales professionals know that they're really just problem solvers and they don't mind giving away some of the good stuff, knowing that if they build a relationship of trust and problem solving with you, it's going to pay dividends down the road. So it's a longer game. So if you get a notice for a webinar, especially Jennifer, if your name's on it or my name's on it,
Right?
people
Pay
should trust
attention.
that it's going to be good and it's going to be interesting. I don't do anything half-assed. Neither do you, and neither do most of the people who show up for webinars. So I love
Exactly.
that recommendation. Love it.
And yes, we don't do anything half-ass. Whole ass all the way, Lori. Whole ass.
Yes, yes, that is true. My whole ass is in everything.
Whole ass all the way. So when we think about like challenging the status quo, which is something you're known for, and I love that about you, challenging the status quo, even in this podcast, you kind of shared how things that seem commonly accepted, mm, we can challenge that. Is that true? How does that look different? So, what are some workplace, I don't know, practices or activities, things that people invest time or money in that you just don't see working? And how do you see things changing? Like some trends, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult for me to say what's working and what's not working because every individual environment is different. So, a place that believes in formal team building in one organization may be kind of cool, and another, it may just be hokey and a flippin' waste of time. So, it's very difficult for me to say that. But I think people can be more discerning, can be more skeptical, or even just curious by not reacting when a company says, you should do this or you shouldn't do this. You can ask questions. You can take a pause. And I think it's very difficult for us sometimes to tap into the executive function in our brain and realize we're not victims at work. We can ask questions. We can be curious. So if there's a program that gets rolled out, you don't have to either jump on board or be super aggressive. You can take a day or two and come back with questions. If there is an initiative or a rollback of initiatives, which is happening in a lot of workforces right now, where it doesn't feel real good, and you're like, wait, I thought we stood for one thing and now we're rolling something back, you don't have to react immediately, but you can think about it. And you can think about, how does this affect me? How does this affect my colleagues, my team, our brand in the organization? And you can ask questions or make some choices about whether or not you want to continue aligning yourself with that brand. So I just think challenging the status quo sounds aggressive, but it's not. It can be thoughtful and contemplative, and it can also be gentle and positive and additive if you give it a second and you think about your next moves. So I don't want anybody to be under the illusion that I'm just like, F this or F that. I mean, to some extent about a lot of things because I'm old. I've seen it now. I've seen patterns, right? But there's a time and a place for everything. And at work, if you want to challenge the status quo, challenge yourself first to give it a day and think about it.
You mentioned skepticism, and I love that because if you think about thoughtful skepticism, that is critical thinking skills.
Yes.
So, how do I wanna think about that? What does that mean? What is the intention behind it?
Yeah.
And I always try to say, I like to assume good intentions.
Mhm.
So, what is the purpose behind
Yeah.
this decision or whatever's, the new thing?
Yeah.
What is behind that and how, like you said, how does it impact me? How does it impact my coworkers, our brand, our customers?
Yeah.
But the idea of thoughtful skepticism, I think, is really important for all of us to take to work, but also probably the rest of our lives as well.
No
Um,
kidding. But
you know,
you mentioned good intent, and I think, like, sometimes that's a bridge too far for a lot of people because 'cause they've just seen stuff in this world, right? So you could be neutral. You could
true. Okay.
assume
All
nothing,
right.
right? And so I think a lot of times, good intent is also like, well, I'm gonna be toxically positive and pretend like this person's not a jerk. We know they're a jerk, right? But we could ask neutral questions to get to the heart of what's really going on. I actually do this in my family all the time, right? And I hope they do this with me. We've talked about it where, okay, I may be annoying or I may be this or I may be that, but just ask. Just don't assume anything. Just ask good questions like, what's going on?
Yep.
Or what are you thinking? Or what are you feeling? Or did you eat breakfast? Yeah, I'll
Are
take
you
that.
hangry? Are you maybe hangry
Yeah,
a little bit?
I get a little hangry. But yes, so neutral questions are also really, really good. Um, and again, confidence, but chill. Just take a day, think about what you want to say. You can practice it with other people. You can pop it into Chat GPT and ask for feedback. Like, that's another good way to do this,
Yep.
or Gemini or whatever platform that plagiarism platform that you want to use, but pop it in there and say, what do you think? How can I make it twice as better? How can I be less passive aggressive? All good tools, all good ways to communicate to get to the heart of things. But yeah.
So I'm going to switch gears just a little bit and think about transparency and authenticity when it comes to leadership and handling complex situations, whether it's a reorg, a certain competitor that's just, sort of overpowering you, or, um, you know,
Yeah.
financial challenges, what have you. How do you see leaders best handling that in a way that's going to resonate with the employees, that's going to help them understand what the next steps are, and kind of get through some of those things when you're coaching and when you see those
Yeah.
observations?
I love a CEO, a CHRO, even a manager or supervisor saying, I can tell you what I know, I can tell you what I'm allowed to tell you, and I can't tell you anything else. And being super transparent around the parameters and around the rules is a really important first step. I think about so many companies that I've worked with in the past or I'm working with right now that are either struggling in the marketplace or losing, market share, and their competitors are eyeing an acquisition, or they're eyeing an acquisition of their competitors, and it's causing all sorts of consternation among the, rank and file. And all you can do is acknowledge market reports. You could say, yes, this is true. These are the numbers. This is fact. This is what we've reported to the marketplace. And yes, this is in the news. I, I either can confirm it or I can't, but I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to tell you a story that isn't true. And I think asking people to be adults and self leaders, your workforce will step up. Your workforce, when they're treated like children and infants, will rise to that level. When they're treated like adults, they will rise. And if they don't, at least you can hold them accountable for those adult like standards. Where it gets so murky is where you demand adult like things, but you communicate like they're children. That's where it gets messy. And I think a consistency and how you speak and what you expect from people is super, super important. I have this conversation every single day. Like, you can tell people, I can't tell you. You can absolutely say, I'm not at liberty to share this information. I can't have this conversation with you. We're going to need to end it right now. You can absolutely say these things. But so many
Yeah.
people are worried about slip ups or think they have to be like super secretive. Human behavior is weird. Be honest, be transparent, be candid.
I love you, and communication was sort of the foundation for everything you just said, the communication part. And by communicating what you know and what you're allowed to tell somebody. I've been a part of acquisitions. I've been a part of like large scale, like, rifts, and not being able to
Yeah.
share some of those things. And it's a weird, awkward spot to be in as a leader. But what I can share, I absolutely will. And then, as you said, if there's something I can't say, I will tell you I can't tell you.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you if there's a point in the future I think I'll be able to share this, and I'll even say, "Remind me," because 'cause I'll tell you why I just said that, but
Yeah.
I can't tell you that for another 2 months or whatever the case is. But a communication approach that is open, you said candid, which I
Yeah.
love, um, is so important because people feel then like you're seeing them as humans, that you're treating them with respect,
Yeah.
that you're appreciating the fact that if you can't trust me with certain things, then why am I here? Why? Right? Why do you even have me employed here if you can't tell me any of these things at all, or you just wanna keep me in the dark because you don't trust what I'm gonna do with it?
Yeah.
Like, where is that level? So I think that's great
It's
because I think leaders need
yeah.
to be candid.
I think you're right. It's also okay to say, "I can't tell you because then I would be fired."
Right.
It's like
Absolutely.
I have been in that situation, like, employees coming to me when I worked in big pharma, like, "Are we next?" I'm like, "Oh, let me sacrifice my career and my
Right.
job to give you an insight as to whether or not you're gonna get laid off because 'cause we're close, like, we're family
Exactly.
here?" So you can be ridiculous. You take it to 10, take it to 11, and people will see the absurdity about what they're asking you to do and be like, "Okay, that's inappropriate?"
Right.
But I have been put in that position more often than not as an HR business partner, an HR manager, an HR director who's been asked to like do important things in the organization. It's like, okay, you're right. I don't want this job anyway. I don't want health insurance. Let me tell you what's coming down the pike.
Right, you're
So
gonna pay my bills, right, if I get fired after telling
correct,
you this? Okay,
correct. I
cool.
mean, all you can do is just be like, we're all colluding with capitalism. What do you want from me? If you're gonna get fired, me telling you is not gonna make this any easier. So I've been there, done that, and also I don't miss working in human resources. Not at all.
But you do host Punk Rock HR.
I do, just
So
because it's a tricky, funny
it's
title.
amazing.
Yeah,
I
I did
love it.
yeah, I was called punk rock HR by a very early boss, and she's like, "Who do you think you are? Punk rock HR?" And I was like, didn't feel great, and I told this story to my friend Chris Dunn, who's now the CHRO of Marriott, in the United States, in Canada maybe? He's got a big job. And Chris Dunn many years ago said, "If you don't buy punkrockhr.com, I'm gonna buy it, and I'm gonna sell it back to you for thousands of dollars." Like, "Oh, shoot, I should buy that domain." And although I don't work in human resources anymore, I believe that HR sits at the intersection of work, power, politics, and money, and I'm interested in those conversations. So I call the thing punk rock HR, and
I
it's
love it.
it sticks. Yeah.
So we've already learned so much from you and your perspective today. Would you mind sharing? Is there a nugget or two from guests that you've had on Punk Rock HR that you could maybe share their knowledge here with our audience?
I love that question. Nobody ever asked me questions like that. So I'll tell you, I recently had a conversation with a guest who's coming up by the name of Cassandra Worthy. And Cassandra Worthy is someone who's an expert in change management, but she has blown up the change curve. She's like that old model based on like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. That's over. That's old. And she's got this new system of really understanding how change happens on the human level, in the individual level, and what we can do to communicate better, to be responsible and in community with one another, and to basically be grown ass adults. And she's an amazing public speaker, someone who just inspires me. But the reason why she's so good at change is because she's had to deal with it in her own life. She was a trained chemical engineer who worked at Procter and Gamble, and in the course of her career started drinking more and got a DUI and was like, "You know what? Things need to change." And from there, and exploring her own experience with change and having experience in corporate America with change, she's gone out to change the lives of other people. And I'm so inspired by her. I stalked her to get her on my podcast. So that's coming up.
I love that. Well, that's exciting. We'll definitely be paying
So
attention
we're
to that.
getting
I
rid
can't
of
wait.
yeah, we're getting rid of the change curve model and we're doing it differently. And Cassandra Worthy is your woman for that.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I remember learning about change management in my MBA, and I remember reading The Heart of Change and sort of the human element, but it did feel a little antiquated. So I'm
Yeah.
very excited to see and hear what she has to say because I'm sure that it's much more relevant, much more modern approach.
It is,
Things have
and
changed.
the old model is based on Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's
Yeah,
research into grief, and
right.
it's weird that we're trying to do big things in the world, but when we talk about changing or being agile, we're going back to a model rooted in grief research, and so Cassandra's like, "No more." We're optimists, we're a change enthusiast, that's a phrase that she uses, and we're going to learn what it takes to be a change enthusiast. And I'm blown away by her research. She's got a certification program. It's really interesting. So, Cassandra Worthy, I'm excited about her.
That's awesome. Yeah, when I think about change, I used to teach like very, very early in my L&D career. I taught a lot of stress management classes, which,
Oh,
was interesting, but I remember changing the script, and it was literally like, how do you survive change and stress? And I turned it into thriving on change. Literally, I changed the title, thriving on change. And the approach was just, we're all dealing with change every day. We change our clothes, we change, how our furniture sits in our room. We change all of these things regularly. So most change we like because we're choosing it. So how do
mhm.
we look at the change that is happening to us? Where can we find the parts that we can control or have the ability to have a perception? So I'm super excited because I think that
Yeah,
it's well needed because corporations are going through significant change
yeah, they are.
every day.
Yeah. I think, like, I learn so much as you do from guests on my podcast in ways that are, like, um, both obvious, but also in small ways, like how to present, how to speak, how to be passionate about something. I'm gonna have my own way of, like, delivering
Yeah.
information and talking and being Laurie Ruettimann, but it's always good to see people in their different styles and their
Yep.
different interpretations of the world come on and communicate it, and I just learn little bits of pieces of, ways to present, ways to, elucidate an idea, and it's awesome. It's really awesome. So, I am not so much concerned with what's in the conversation, but how the conversation unfolds and makes people
Right.
feel. And hopefully, through the experience of listening to Punk Rock HR, just like listening to your podcast, people feel really good about themselves, like they have a path forward, like they have agency, that they are self leaders, and that they met someone cool in their journey along the way.
I love that. Laurie, thank you so much for joining us here on Fully Engaged, and it was great to see you again.
You too. I feel fully engaged right now. I need to go do something, go run a couple miles. Yeah, I feel great.
This has been Fully Engaged with Jennifer N. Sutherland. If you're interested in discovering how the art and science of leadership can combine to create exceptional workplaces, visit us at SutherlandTalentSolutions.com. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay fully engaged.